trace test it's a tool that helps you test by using distributed traces. You have a bunch of traces that get generated by your system. Let's say you have microservices, Kubernetes, functions, whatever you're using doesn't really matter. Before you push to production, you're using those traces you already have that your system is exporting to run tests.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Highlight Podcast. I'm Jay, the CEO of Highlight.
And I'm Chris. I produce the podcast and I work on our JavaScript SDKs at Highlight.
And last but not least, we have Adnan, an ex-entrepreneur and software engineer, and now the head of DevRel at TraceTest. Adnan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Awesome to be here. And really happy to have this conversation with you.
Us too. Okay, now do we want to continue the conversation about hair transplants? This would be a good time.
Oh yeah, I've been waiting for this for so long to actually pour my heart out and talk to people that have the same condition that I do, Chris.
Your early days though. Early days.
Yeah, it's like you can see the letter U on my forehead. Like it's
got a long way to go, but yeah.
I feel like you'll be fine. I don't know. You might be fine for longer than you think. No?
I mean, sure. I thank you for actually making me feel better. I think as if you want me to feel better than the actual truth is.
I see. So you kind of see it coming, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, it's like one of those nagging feelings at the back of your head, you know?
Fair enough.
I found it to be worse. I found it to be worse to watch it fall out than to have it shaved. Like it was the act of just watching it march backwards every day that was so painful.
Yeah.
In the shower, you just kind of see your hair fall out and you go like,
man.
But yeah, there's always a transplant route, you know. There's always a couple of grand to put into the transplant, and then you look scarred for a couple of weeks. But also the thing is, you can't really sleep. You have to sleep upright, like you have to sleep like an owl, more or less, because you can't put your head down. Like you literally get a pillow around your neck, like on an airplane, and then you have to kind of sleep like that hurts.
Oh,
like that, I think that part is
for after the surgery.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And it looks pretty horrible.
I see. But no, like once it's in steady state, it's fine. Right?
Sure. But it also, again, it takes like a year to actually grow proper. So like you get baby hair and like, you know, baby chickens, like baby chicks when they're like yellow and fluffy, you get like fluff hair for the first year. And then it has to kind of grow out. And then
it's like you're literally planting like a plant in your
head. It is. It's like you have to water it. You have to be nice to it. You get special shampoo, like baby shampoo or some stuff. Like it's a procedure. It is quite literally a procedure. And don't ask me why I know so much about it. Okay. Everybody knows this. I swear.
You considered? Okay. Last question on this note. Have you considered the Esplin route where you just shave it?
I have, but also the thing is that if I do that, I have to get super ultra buff because, you know, what's his name? The guy that plays the actor that does all of the action movies.
Dwayne The Rock.
Both work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess both work.
So it's like you have to get super jacked to actually be bald and kind of own it. And I've been trying to get super jacked and it's like, it's not working. People tell me, like, how do you, like, you've been training for so long. Like, how long do you have to train to be buff? Until the end of your life, until you die. There's no stopping.
I don't know about being buff. Like, I feel like Esplin really rocks it. But Esplin's definitely in shape, you know? Like, you know that he's like, he works out.
That's what I'm telling you.
So maybe that's the baseline. But anyway.
It helps.
Fair enough.
Helps it.
Cool. Well, Adnan, let's start by, you know, you talked a little bit earlier before the podcast about like your background and how you got to TraceTest. Give us the rundown on that front. Like it sounds like you started some companies in the past and things like that. Would love like just a quick refresher on that, and then we can kind of dive more into what TraceTest does.
Yeah, for sure. So a quick rundown is I've co-founded a startup, basically an online education startup, like a product back in, when was it? Probably 2016 or so, 17. It's been a while, 8 or so years, maybe 9 years now. And then it failed miserably because buying stuff online, you need to use a credit card. And then in Bosnia, the credit card penetration was probably like 2% back then. So people really didn't have an option to buy the stuff we were selling. But you live and you learn, and then you see how you can improve down the road. And it was what it was, But at least it was cool because all of the knowledge that both myself and my team members from back then, we all kind of landed on our feet very, very successfully. Everybody right now they're doing really well. They're really smart people, really intelligent people, and we took everything we managed to learn and just put that into our new ventures, which for me was basically moving into developer relations from being one of the founding engineers. Basically, because I was probably the one that they trusted most to sell the product we were building in the first place. And that's basically what DevRel is. I mean, you guys know you're basically the PR marketing forefront influencing PR person of the product you're building, right? So that's the rundown of developer relations. And yes, that is true. We do stuff. We don't just go to conferences and drink boba tea or whatever the hell they call it. I don't even know what the hell they call it. We do actual things
too. But yeah.
Sure.
That's
but
like icing on the cake. The boba tea.
The boba tea. Yeah. I've one of my integration partners who work with right now. She is wild for boba tea. It's always boba tea, and it's hilarious.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. Good stuff.
But nice. Okay, so you've kind of moved over to the trace test side of things on the DevRel side. Tell us about trace tests. Like we've talked to Ken a good amount at this point, but give the viewers a little bit of an overview of what trace test does. And maybe a little bit on where you're going and where you see this going long term.
Yeah, for sure. So for context, Ken is the founder of Trace Test, and he is, for the record, shout out, beast of a guy. Guy works like crazy. Like it's nuts. I like working with people that hustle because it gives you motivation to hustle as well. And it's really, really nice. And from that point of view, Trace Test is mile high overview. It's a tool that helps you test by using distributed traces. So think of it this way. You have a bunch of traces that get generated by your system. Let's say you have microservices, Kubernetes, functions, whatever you're using, doesn't really matter. You guys on the highlight side, you make sure that when something goes to shit, that gets fixed after the fact, because you have traces, you have logs, you have whatever else your system is gathering. What we do is we take a step left, or like a push left as we call it, where before you push to production, you're using those traces you already have that your system is exporting to run tests. So across the entire stack of, let's say you want to do, whilst you're developing, you're writing your feature, you're writing your trace instrumentation as part of your feature, and you're immediately doing the TDD of, let me see if this telemetry is actually correct. I run it through trace test. I add my assertions that validate that my feature is behaving the way I want it. I validate my trace so that I make sure that me in the future actually knows when stuff goes wrong, and I can go back and troubleshoot it. And then I can also integrate and automate that part of running those tests as part of my integration end-to-end CI tests, or I can even build deployment pipelines that integrate these tests within those, I'm going to call it software development lifecycle. So that's like using a cool term. But yeah, that's the rough rundown of pushing left with testing with traces.
Nice. And so what is the interface that developers interact with when it comes to trace tests? Is it like a CLI tool that they can run in their CI pipeline? Is it like a UI where you export all your traces to your endpoint and then I go there to like assert things? Like what does the product experience look like,
We're lucky to have a pretty awesome team of engineers, and I'm going to say yes to all of the above. So from the get-go, we wanted it initially to be a developer tool. So you get a UI that you run like Jaeger, like everybody knows Jaeger. It's one of the most popular tracing tools out there. You run it as part of your development lifecycle, where you get a UI. Like Postman, you trigger a test, but as part of the response, you also get the whole distributed trace that was generated by that transaction. And then you can go first, you get an overview of exactly what your system is doing. So that's like, imagine me being a new engineer to a project. I have no idea what's happening. Absolutely no clue what microservice is talking to what microservice and how that all interconnects. I can run one API test and say, oh okay, this makes sense now, right? And then I can build my test suites and my test specs to be totally correct based on every single span within that distributed trace. So maybe there's an external API request that gets triggered by a microservice behind some message queue or whatever. I can specifically test that particular service because I have access to the attributes on the span itself. So that's, it's as white box testing as you can possibly make it.
Understood. Makes a lot of sense. So Adnan, what types of traces do you support? Is it like only, we've talked to Ken specifically on the integration side about like OpenTelemetry and that kind of stuff. Is it very OpenTelemetry friendly and you sort of only stick with that? Or do you also support other formats for traces?
So I have to be honest. We're OpenTelemetry first. So our main and initial focus has been OpenTelemetry just because, let's be realistic. OpenTelemetry isn't really the tool of the future anymore. It's the tool of today. Everybody uses it. Everybody's going to be using it. And we see vendors like Datadog, New Relic, and the big guns, so to call it, they're all adopting OpenTelemetry en masse. Like they're hustling to get it working, right? So we're obviously focusing primarily on OpenTelemetry, but we don't really care. As long as we can pick up a trace, that's fine, right? The under the hood, how it works is if you imagine triggering, let's say triggering a transaction, what we really do, we just inject and wrap that in a trace parent ID. So we just inject a parent ID that gets appended to the beginning of that transaction, and then every subsequent span that gets generated by your system just gets appended to that trace parent ID. So it is quite literally, imagine it as we wrap the trace that you already generate and show it in our UI, so you can build a test on it.
Understood. Okay. So if we go back to the experience side of things, Adnan, like on the whole, you said there's also a UI and it started as a developer tool. Like if I'm using TraceTest and I want to assert that microservice A hits microservice B, and let's just say like service A hits service B, let's say is what I want to assert. Do I do that in code to do the assertion? Or am I going? Okay. So you support both, and it's like sort of like a, whether you do it in the UI or not, it like gets represented as some sort of code internal in your system. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the kicker. So one really nice thing about it is that everything you do in the user interface, you can export as a YAML file, because we work on a principle of having resources very similar to Kubernetes, where every single resource in the product itself is a YAML file, and it's just a nice little definition of what it is, what it does. So everything you do in the UI, you can export as a file, or you can just physically write that file yourself. The system doesn't really care. What's cool there is that the way of automating things are so simple, because you can literally export a file, run the file with the CLI with whatever CI tool you want. You just install the CLI, connect to your account with the token, and then you run the file, and then you're done. Like there's nothing really you need to think about, except for, we also expose that command you need to run in the UI as well. So you don't really have to think about it a lot. You just go copy this CLI command from the UI, run it in wherever I want to run it, in Jenkins and GitHub Actions or whatever I'm using, and it just kind of magically works. Now, the kicker here as well is that we had a customer actually a couple of months ago that said, but we already kind of have test setups and test teardowns written in TypeScript, because I need to ping my database to load some data like batch load some data, and then I need to run some tests on that, and then I need to kind of tear that down, clean up the database, etc., etc. And I really like doing that in TypeScript. Like that was our customers' reasoning. We thought, that makes perfect sense. Like, why wouldn't you want to run teardown and setups of tests? Because people do that with what's it called, Cypress and Playwright and whatever they're using. Yep. And we said, let's write an NPM module, and that's what we basically did. So you can do the same thing as you would do through the CLI. You can do that via TypeScript or JavaScript in code as well. So you can literally say, yep, I want to run this particular file against my particular trace test account, and I can do that via JavaScript as well. So it is both scripted and coded and whatever, but basically whatever you want to for your use case.
And that way I can do the setup of my database, seed some data into it, import, and then I've already imported your trace test NPM module, and then I can run trace-test.run and then tear down. Yeah?
Exactly.
Okay, and then it pulls from the same config file locally.
Exactly. So we want the experience to be same. Like, people are like, I'm a JavaScript engineer, like from the beginning. Like I've been writing JavaScript since before Angular was like Node was like 0.12 or something. It was like, I'm not that old. I'm just old in JavaScript, right?
Sure.
So we're used to stuff like that. Like, I want to do an npm install. I want to import my module. I want to use it with a method like dot something, run whatever, run it, tear it down, forget about it, right? And people like that's easy to do testing that way. And I can see that because it's a script. You run the script wherever you want to run the script, and you kind of fire and forget, right? And we wanted to get that experience that people are already used to make that part of somebody's development lifecycle. And that's basically the idea behind it.
Understood. Let's go back to OpenTelemetry, Adnan. Are there any interesting things you've learned, like from having talked to customers in the OpenTelemetry world, in terms of how that world is changing, or how that, the OpenTelemetry use case is growing? Like, any sort of things on that front?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think the first thing that I would be important to mention is from the get-go. Sorry, I'm not quite sure if you were at KubeCon in Paris. So here, the European KubeCon, a couple of
we were. Yeah, we were.
Awesome.
And I actually saw Ken there. I think Ken was there too, right?
Yeah. It was Ken and myself. We were there, and we were. I mean, side note, super busy because it was only the two of us at the booth, and we kind of died. It was rough, but it was great fun. Now, why I'm mentioning that is because the OpenTelemetry community specifically, they went, as far as I know, went stable as per pretty much every single library for their OpenTelemetry SDKs. So specifically, we're stable. OpenTelemetry is stable. So, and that's for metrics and logs as well. So not just the tracing SDKs, but the metrics and logs as well. So we're getting to that point where the OpenTelemetry collector, so the main collector that we use for those signals, but also all of the SDKs are at a state where you don't really have to be worried anymore. Like, it's not one of those, there's just some bunch of super smart open source developers building this. No, it's everybody's is contributing to this. We get, like, I know people. So my fellow DevRels from companies like Datadog, New Relic, ServiceNow, like all of those actual major companies are all firmly behind this, and they're heavily working and supporting on making this better. So somebody like Datadog, where you're thinking yesterday, these guys, they're just kind of pushing everything against OpenTelemetry. They want to run their own Datadog agent or whatever they call it. Not so much anymore. It's like they're dedicating multiple people to work on the OpenTelemetry demo, which is the main repository for showing people how OpenTelemetry works. They have multiple people contributing to libraries, to SDKs. So we're getting to that point where, like, it's not really a game anymore. Like, it's not a bunch of open source people building cool shit. Like, the people are actually using it and pushing it because they need to.
Makes sense. And I've noticed that, like, now, like, in the same world of it's not a game anymore, I feel like there used to be like Datadog's SDKs versus OTel. Like, what should I use? But now everyone's just defaulting to OTel, and it's more of a question of like the actual product that people are using behind the hood, which is good, right? It means that like, you're not bought in, and after you kind of like start sending data, you can kind of make a switch really very quickly. So I think it's a very consumer forward thing. Like it's helping the everyday developer pick the best tool for the job. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think it's a good thing for the vendors as well, because they can offload their agent teams to actually contribute to OpenTelemetry.
Yep.
So why should I dedicate X number of engineers to build a shipping or a collection or whatever agent instead of dedicating them to the community that everybody can use?
Yeah.
And so you're I mean, obviously we're at that state in the economy, in the industry right now, where everybody kind of wants to save some money. Everybody kind of, investors want their money back, so people have to validate every single decision, which that's the way we're set up right now. That's fine. But that would make a financial sense. It would make a good decision from a financial standpoint as well, where you're dedicating more people to actually building a quality product that can generate better customers, because you're taking away from spending time on building agents, which I think is perfectly valid.
I agree. So I guess, Adnan, on the trace test side of things, what are the top, like, or how do you find y'all's customers? Where do your customers come through? Is it mostly through open source and y'all's conference engagement? Is it through something maybe that you didn't think you would learn, but you've learned? Tell us about that.
Oh no, it's all me being awesome at DevReling, and my top of the funnel skills are phenomenal. No, obviously not true. Obviously not true. I'm lucky to have a team. So basically, our team, Ken included, and all of the engineers that work with us. The engineers are just as good at being DevRels as I am. That's like number one. Like the top thing that makes, I think, the product gain traction is we've had blog posts written by engineers multiple times. It's like maybe once a month or even twice a month. So from that standpoint, it's amazing. Obviously, they get help from both myself, Ken as well. Like they're not doing it by themselves. They have a lot of support, which is also important. But the fact that they're ready to share knowledge, not just internally, but also in the OpenTelemetry community, in the OpenTelemetry blog. We've had multiple contributions by our team in the OpenTelemetry community as well, which I think is very important, because we have to share the knowledge because obviously we're dogfooding, like we're using our tool for ourselves to build our tool, and then we're using OpenTelemetry actively as well, so we can give that knowledge back to the community as well, so we can share and build upon that. So that's the first thing I think is very important. Then obviously Ken is just a very fun and likable person, so he's just a great person at meeting new people. And then I've had, as I said, I think the key here that we're at right now is, from my point of view, is more lower end of the funnel. So how do we get people from sign up to actually be very successful with the tool? And I would say, because I've had the experience of doing more of a sales engineer role, because I was a co-founder, and then basically when you're a co-founder, you're always doing sales. There's no going around it. I mean, you would know. I mean, I'm not gonna go into detail there. You obviously know. So I've had that experience. That's what's I think that experience in my background is what's helping me to get people as successful as they need to be. And also being very annoying with emails. You would be surprised if you actually write somebody a real email that's not automated. People kind of feel like you care, which you obviously do, but you just send it personally instead of automating it through whatever HubSpot or whatever SendGrid or whatever you're using. Right. So I think that's quite important as well.
Makes a lot of sense. And so would you say that like it's like mostly inbound, the people that come in using your tool, like from the blog posts and the things that you guys write, and then from that you sort of capture those folks and then reach out to them, so on and so forth?
Yeah. And what I think is a very important thing here as well is that I would say our main resource, as far as I've seen so far, on users that are quite interested in trying it, has been the documentation, and then the specific way we we have a demo to show people exactly what the tool does. So it's a public facing demo with multiple demo environments that somebody can literally click one button, sign in to get access to the demo in our cloud product, like in our managed cloud product, and they can just click around, see exactly what the tool does. And it's with real data because we're running multiple apps. We're hosting and running multiple apps that they can check out. So one example is, we obviously all know about the OpenTelemetry demo application. So the microservice demo application that the OpenTelemetry team maintains. We're running that, and we're using that as the application under test in our demos. So one really important thing for inbound, I'm going to say top of funnel inbound marketing, is showing people how to be successful in as few steps as possible. So that's been one of my pet peeves is specifically that. How do I get you from looking at the welcome page on the documentation to getting to an install screen, to getting to a sign up page, to getting to what the aha moment in the app itself is? So if we can get that to 3 or 4 clicks, or even less if it's possible, depending on how complicated your product is, that's you're set for success. Because as long as they want to know, as long as they go, oh, okay, so this is conceptually very interesting, I really want to know more, then you can actually send them a message in your community Slack or whatever community tool you're using and say, hey, yo, I saw you check this out. Would you like to get a one-on-one demo? Would you like to see how it works? Do you want more resources? Do you need me to talk to your boss about getting funding for whatever you want to use? It just makes it easier that way, and it works. The hand-holding definitely works.
Yeah, and it's like if someone's already seen the product, and it's not just, I feel like in the developer space, you can get very far from proving out the use case and then making the pitch rather than just making the pitch. Whereas I found that in like other worlds, like sales enablement and things like that, you can just make the pitch, but it sort of just doesn't work in the in the developer space, which is good. It's a kind of another reason why like the actual product matters. Kind of on our earlier OpenTelemetry conversation, but cool. I guess, Adnan, the next thing I wanted to ask about is like integration points. So you mentioned, I had talked to Ken a little bit about how Highlight, for example, could integrate with TraceTest, but maybe more broadly, just tell us about how you guys have had success integrating with other products, and then what that experience looks like with respect to the developer's experience, so on and so forth.
Got it. Yeah. So TraceTest in itself, it basically has 2 integration points. So let's look at it from the point of view of, let's say, Postman, another test tool. The only thing that you need is a way to, through a network, access your application you're testing. So you basically need access to an API by being on the same network as that particular API. TraceTest has the same requirements. So you need to have network connection to the app you're testing. That makes perfect sense. That's perfectly logical. But also, TraceTest needs to have access to the tracing backend where your traces are stored. Or if you don't want to do it that way, you can expose OTLP ingestion with TraceTest directly. So let's say TraceTest and Highlight we do an integration. A customer wants to keep their traces in Highlight, so they don't want to export it anywhere else. They just want to make sure Highlight is their primary source of truth for traces. TraceTest has a polling algorithm that connects to your Trace API. Once every time a test runs, we would gather the trace, basically query for the trace from Highlight and show it
based on the span ID or things like. Yes. You would okay, got it.
Based on the initial parent ID, parent span ID, trace ID actually, that we inject whilst running a test. So that's the way we wrap it. So that's basically the premise of what we want to do. We don't want to be a tracing backend. So that we leave that to you. Like, that good. You've been doing it for a long while. You know how to do it well. We know how to do testing well. That's where we excel. We don't really care about storing any tracing or anything. We only care about that one particular trace for one particular test, and that's what we store. So it's more of a like test observability than it is like observability in production, if that makes
a lot of sense. Yeah. So that's option one, right? Where you basically query us every time you need data from a previous run or a current run or whatever it is, right? The other option, it sounds like you would ingest the traces, yeah? Like there is an option where you can. Why would a customer want that to be the case?
So it all depends on their setup. So maybe they have a local environment running where they don't have a tracing backend. So they just want to run a few tests while they're developing, so they can send traces directly to the OTLP ingest endpoint we expose. Or if they have a CI environment, they don't really want to store the traces anywhere. They just want to send it directly to us to build a test or to run tests, and then they just want to drop it. So it can be a resource thing where they don't really want to run unnecessary infra, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, like if I'm running this and if I'm running my environment in CI, why would I want to send it to Highlight when I'm not even going to look at those traces? But I'm only going to look at them in the context of a test. Exactly. So that's where trace testers would ingest it.
Exactly. That's why we care about those traces, because they're tied to a test and because we save your tests on our dashboard on our end. So you don't really specifically care about the trace itself. You only care about the traces that are connected to a test. So that would be one point of view. Another could be if you're already using a tracing vendor right now for your production environment, but you sadly don't have that vendor doesn't expose a trace query API. So let's say Datadog, for an example, they don't expose an API to get traces out of their storage. So there's no real way that trace tests can get to them because they're not exposing an API. Other things like AWS X-Ray, they expose an API, so we can fetch the trace. Other like Grafana Tempo exposes it, so we can fetch it from Grafana as well. But other vendors that don't expose it, then for them you would need to use something like a dual pipeline in an OpenTelemetry collector, where you would send all of your traces directly to your collector, and then the collector would then split based on the need. So you could even configure the collector based on a filter to say, if the filter has a trace test specific trace, send it to trace test. If it doesn't, send all of the rest to my Datadog, my Highlight, my whatever else I want to use. So that would be, yeah. So we want to make sure that all use cases for all of our customers are available. So I think that's the main reason we'll have these two options right now.
Understood. And how do you store the data on your end when it comes in through your OTLP ingestion?
So this is the fun part. So currently, right now, so for let's say the managed cloud product we have, we use a very tiny like agent that's running as part of your infra, and what the agent does, it only picks up the trace that's trace test specific. It drops the rest. So we only store the one we care about, and we store it as a contextually stored as part of a test. So we're basically storing tests. We're not really storing the trace.
Oh, as like some set of files or something.
Yeah, we are, but we don't really care about the traces. Like we just care about the test and the trace that's connected to that particular test. Because every trace specifically, I mean, I like doing that as a little example. If you just console log a trace, is just like a JSON file with a bunch of stuff in it. So, I mean, we don't really care about any of that. We care about one particular distributed trace as part of the test, and we're going to show that for you. And then you can basically build assertions or test specs or whatever you want based on that particular trace. So again, test observability. It's actually seeing what your testing is doing.
Got it. Makes sense. How do you handle like flakiness in a test, Adnan? Like, is this, and I don't actually have too much experience with I definitely have experience with testing, right? But I've never used something in this space. I feel like it's a relatively new concept, just given distributed tracing and things like that. But would you say it's any more or any less flaky than any other integration test I would be running? And maybe that's a good first question.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to think about, primarily because flaky can depend on a lot of different things. So specifically, let's say you really only want to do black box testing. where you specifically only care about the input output of a particular microservice. Perfectly fine. It has a valid use case. Who knows? I don't manage behind this microservice. I don't care what's happening behind it. I only care about the input and output. Sure, fine. When is a test flaky in that point of view? If something breaks behind the microservice, do we think it's flaky? Probably, right? But do I care if I don't manage that service behind? I just kind of throw it to the other team that manages the other one. Then it's not my problem. So it's all, it's very, 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 very relative. Same thing is if we take the same use case, but we have a white box test where I have a microservice that talks to another microservice that talks to a database or whatever. What if the database is actually throwing an issue based on a test that I wrote? Is that flaky? So the thing is, again, it's maybe the test is failing because the database is actually doing something right because somebody changed a feature. Then my test is not up to date with the feature, and then that's it's a false negative again. So things like that. The thing is how do we define flaky, right? So I'm not smart enough to be 100% honest. I don't think I'm smart enough to know how to define that.
No, you're right. I think I get what you're saying. And I guess naturally, because these tests have more moving parts, I would think that they would be more likely to fail. But what you're saying is that's a good thing. Like, that means that your integration test or whatever you're testing in the first place has gone wrong, and you should be fixing something. So
something changed, and then you want to be sure that it changed because you want it to change. So even let's say you did change a feature, and then the behavior of your database did change. So maybe there's you created an assertion for a particular select request to be happening on the database because that's the one select request or interaction you want. Somebody changed it to be select where or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And then that test is failing now, but it's failing because the feature changed. So it's going to push you to actually make sure that your test is following what your feature is doing. So again, it can be bad if you're solely focusing on black box testing, or if you're primarily wanting to be more on that side of the testing route. But again, it's all, do you want it to or not? I would say that white box testing is maybe a slightly better for the microservice or whatever Kubernetes environments we're focusing on right
now. Understood. Okay. The last question I wanted to ask was around the types of use cases for trace test, Adnan. Like, are there types of companies or use cases within a company that are particularly specialized and like good customers for you, and but more importantly, like add the most value to those people using it?
I mean, I think we would probably highlight and trace that we probably fit in the same bucket where any customer, or let's say any user right now that has OpenTelemetry in their system that's fully committed to using tracing right now across their environment or across their organization, those are the ones where we really want to talk to. So from that point of view, the most value you can get by using trace test is if you already have OpenTelemetry in your system, or if you're already exporting traces somewhere, because you've already done all of the heavy lifting to get telemetry in your system. So if you have all of that telemetry in your system, you have the telemetry in your development environments, in your testing environments, in your QA, staging, whatever environment, CI. So if you've already done the heavy lifting, you can use all of that for your testing as well. So I would say that that's the biggest ROI for somebody right now would be, okay, I have put in months and months to get this working. Let's use that as part of my pre-production. It's not just, oh shit, something broke, let me fix it. Sure, great, awesome. It is amazing that you can do that. Obviously, everybody tests in production, everybody tests in production. I'm not going to lie, we all do. It's normal. It's absolutely normal. Don't tell my boss. Anyway, so, but we want to make that a possibility in pre-production as well. So you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night to fix something that broke in production, because you can specifically say, I always want this particular trace to look this way. If it doesn't, don't merge it, right? Make it fail my CI.
And one of the really nice knock-on effects of this is that your testing and your observability are now all first-class citizens in your code base. Like, you have to keep them all right at all times, or things are going to blow up.
Yeah, and I would tie on to that with actually one of our users specifically like that, because in his team, it was just very hard to keep the telemetry up to date. Somebody writes a feature, and then the telemetry kind of isn't really good anymore, and then you kind of have to go back and update the telemetry in another PR, and then it just becomes spaghetti, you know. But this way, he could specifically push people and say, "Yo, let's actually make sure to validate that our telemetry is good. Let's validate that our feature is good by validating that our telemetry is good, and then let's use that in our CI." So it is like the you know, write better telemetry by making sure your telemetry, actually making sure that your feature is working, and then make sure that your feature is working by making your telemetry better, and then it just kind of goes in that loop. And it is, I mean, I love TDD. Test-driven development for me, I think, is amazing. Back when I was an engineer, I wasn't really good as an engineer, but test-driven development made me actually not suck. So like, imagine it's the same thing, but it's you get observability instead of just the testing.
Yeah, and it's a virtuous cycle because you're improved. Like the observability improves, the testing improves the observability. Everything's just really reinforcing. Yeah, that sounds like a really good situation to be in.
And it's one of our customers. They have like they're onboarding engineers on the weekly, so they get new engineers every week. And like, imagine being a new engineer in a team where you have probably 500 people in an engineering organization. How the hell are you supposed to know what one microservice down the road does? Like, you have no idea what one microservice Z or whatever does, right? Unless you actually get a hierarchical overview of exactly what the spans or the distributed trace looks like, and you can go in and see, oh, okay, so this does that. The attribute I'm getting is this. The value I'm getting out of it. The output is this. The input. So it's basically it's a sanity check whilst you're writing code. And then if the code is good, you can make the telemetry good, and then you can just do again the loop, make the code better by making the telemetry better.
Very cool. Very cool. Cool, Adnan. Well, I think that kind of wraps things up. This is particularly awesome because I feel like I was talking to Ken earlier just about how the integration works, and I feel like by the end of this podcast now I actually understand where Highlight and Trace Test are kind of could connect and like how people could use it. So thanks for the overview on that end. And yeah, more broadly, it was nice to meet you. Do you have any questions for us before we kind of wrap up?
I mean, I could throw the same question back at you. Like, what's your favorite customer? Like, what's your particular type of people that you want to get into to try and Highlight?
Yeah, it's very similar actually, in the sense that like I think in the enterprise, people that are very open telemetry forward are better fits, right? And we haven't had as much success like completely switching over a customer from like a competitor, like a Datadog or New Relic. But when there are teams within these large enterprises that are like, hey, we want to switch to open telemetry, or they want to make some sort of major change, and we kind of move with that change, that's sort of the best fit. You know what I mean? Which seems very similar to you. So yeah, I think Trace Test and Highlight, it can't hurt for us to kind of try to work together in the future. And so I'll definitely continue that conversation moving forward. And yeah, overall, it was nice to have you, Adnan.
Definitely. I'm writing down. I've actually already written down that we're doing an integration. Like, we are going to partner. Like, I have quotas. Okay, like I have quarterly meetings. So the record,
sounds good. So we'll make you hit your quota then. But yeah, we're down. That sounds fun. But cool. Okay, thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, super nice meeting you, Chris, Jay.
You too. Take care, Adnan. See you later.
Yeah, you too. See ya.